As all of you know, we are getting inundated every day with talk of the 2016 presidential elections. They're a long, long way off, but seems to be on the newsmakers' minds every day, at least the news reporters' minds every day. And what we forget is we actually have 2015 elections that are going to be upon us long before the 2016 elections ever come up. And I thought it would be good if we had a discussion to alert you to what is on the docket for this coming fall. There are one very hot gubernatorial election, some state legislative elections, and some ballot initiatives. They may not necessarily be in your state, but I think they're indicative of the issues are indicative of what's going to be on people's minds not only this year but next year. So before we get way ahead of ourselves and talk about 2016, we're going to spend today talking about 2015. To do that, we're going to meet with Brittany Clingen. She's one of our Ballot PD All-Stars. Brittany's been with us repeatedly before. She's a great guest, and I know she'll have a lot of great information and insight today on the 2015 elections. Brittany, welcome.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
Does it kind of fluster you a bit to know you're working on 2015 and everybody else is already want to know about 2016?
No, it's good because, obviously there are not nearly as many elections in 2015 and there aren't quite as many high-profile ones, but there's still elections and they're still happening and they need coverage. So I enjoy working on the off-year elections.
Now we have at least one heater election in Kentucky for governor, correct?
Yes, yeah, there are a handful of governor races in 2015 and the Kentucky one seems to be the most competitive. The Attorney General, Jack Conaway, is running as a Democrat, and he is going to face off against Matt Bevin, who won the Republican primary, which was very heated. He won by just 83 votes. So that will definitely be a tight race to watch.
Was there a recount, or?
There wasn't an official recount, but they did go back and kind of review the the voting rolls and everything. And I believe the challenger did not ask for an official recount. But the night of the election, people weren't sure who had won the primary. But it did turn out it was Matt Bevin. And there was a lot of debate going on in the primary among the Republican contestants. And Matt Bevin is in support of dismantling the state health exchange and switching the pension system from a defined benefit to a 401k style contribution plan. So like I said, those issues were very prevalent in the Republican primary. So we're expecting that those issues will come up again in the general election.
And I appreciate you bringing up those issues because we don't talk about candidates on the show, but we do talk about issues. And now with the Supreme Court having ruled on Obamacare and it clearly not going away, at least anytime soon, the issue of the exchanges, I think, is going to play out not just in Kentucky, but across the board in many states. And an issue we've talked about with you before and others is this pension issue.
Yes.
Does Kentucky have a pension deficit at this point, or do they have one as significant?
I believe their unfunded liabilities are below the 80% threshold that's kind of set there to be a marker of whether the system is kind of healthy or not. So they struggled during the recession and are trying to kind of, I think, get ahead of things before they get to the point, where states like Illinois and California, where they're really in trouble. So this is why it's become kind of a big issue in Kentucky.
So that's the one we're calling the heater. How many governor races are there altogether? Do you know?
You know what? I'd have to double check. Just a handful. But this one's the one that we're definitely watching the closest.
Gotcha. And again, for the viewers' sake, I think the two issues of the exchange and the pension are very telling. And I think those are clearly going to be issues we're going to be seeing for 2016, without a doubt.
Yes, absolutely.
But the Kentucky legislature doesn't have an election this year.
No.
Is that odd to have a governor being elected in a year without any legislators?
I don't think so. Like I said, there are always a few states that have their governor's elections during off years. New Jersey is one of them, Kentucky. So I think it's just kind of when those elections fall.
So we'll definitely keep our eye on these elections, particularly those particular issues. At the legislative level, we've got 4 states, correct?
Yes. And the state that we're watching really closely that will be probably the most competitive and interesting to watch is Virginia. And currently, the state Senate is controlled by a Republican majority. but they maintain control just by a few seats. It's 21 to 19. So this could definitely flip in 2015 to Democrat majority control. We've identified 9 seats that could swing. They kind of hang in the balance, including 2 seats that are open and 4 seats that had a margin of victory of 5% or less during the last election. So these really, it could go either way. And if there's a tie, so if the chamber were split evenly, 2020, that would actually benefit Democrats because the lieutenant governor can break ties in the state Senate, and the current lieutenant governor is a Democrat. So if it ends up there's a tie, it will actually end up being kind of a Democrat majority.
Now, we've talked on other shows about trifecta states. I think you just answered the question. Virginia is currently not a trifecta state.
No, it's not. And even if the Senate does flip to Democrat, it still won't be because the Republicans have a decent majority in the House.
Now, you said there's 9 seats that are contested. Are all 40 seats up at one time in Virginia?
Yes. Yeah, they're all on the ballot. And there are 21 of the seats are essentially running unopposed. No major party candidates have declared. And 10 of these seats are Democrats, 11 are Republicans. So barring any crazy unforeseen event, these seats will probably stay as they currently are.
Well, nine competitive seats in today's world is actually a decent amount of competitive seats.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Is there any magic to that of what's happening, that all of a sudden we're having competitive seats in Virginia?
I can't really say. I think we'd have to see if that ends up being a trend over time. You know, like I said, right now, 2 of them are open. 4 of them had very low margins of victory the last time around. So that's something we would certainly keep an eye on, see if we notice any trends over the next several years, or if we pick up on any from past elections.
Now, we talked about 2 issues that may show up in the Kentucky governor's race. Any specific issues bubbling up in Virginia?
Not yet. It's probably that would be more, kind of race specific. There aren't any big statewide issues that we're looking at the moment. On our page, we break down each of the races, especially those 9 competitive ones that I mentioned. And, readers can look into the candidates more closely and read about any kind of district specific issues.
So the other states are New Jersey, Mississippi, Louisiana, correct?
Yes.
But in one of those states, they're not electing the Senate. Is that correct, New Jersey?
I believe so. I would have to confirm that.
Okay. Well, I went to the Ballotpedia page. We're going to talk about it in a minute. I'm pretty sure I got that one right. New Jersey must be a state similar to Virginia, then, where the whole Senate gets elected at once, but this is not their year, I'm guessing.
Correct.
So of the 4 states, Louisiana and Mississippi are currently Republican trifectas. Any risk of that changing?
No, not that we have not identified those as particularly competitive. We're expecting those to stay.
And in New Jersey, that's currently divided. Is there any chance New Jersey would become a trifecta state?
Again, unlikely. Virginia is really the one that we're watching that could potentially not change trifecta status, but the chamber could switch.
Change the chamber. And
Exactly.
in that case, if it changed, you'd have a Democratic governor, perhaps a Democratic Senate, and you'll still have a Republican House.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. All right, moving ahead, 3 states you want to talk about important ballot measures.
Yes. So I guess we'll start with Ohio. I think that's the one everyone's talking about the most because there's a good chance we're going to see a marijuana legalization measure in Ohio in 2015. That one is not certified for the ballot yet, but supporters have gathered a lot of signatures, and we are expecting that to make the ballot. So that would legalize the medical and recreational use of marijuana for people ages 21 and older. It would also establish 10 what they're calling marijuana cultivation, growth, and I believe excavation sites. And this has caused some controversy because some people are saying these 10 sites that are essentially established by this amendment, it's creating a monopoly because these 10 sites would be the only places where marijuana could be cultivated and marijuana-infused products could be created. So the legislature, in turn, has created kind of a competing amendment, and they have referred that to the ballot. That will definitely appear on the ballot in November. And what that is essentially doing is it's kind of alerting voters to the fact that there's a monopoly issue on this marijuana ballot. And if the measure is approved, all future ballot measures that address monopolies would ask voters two questions. The first question would be, is the voter aware and do they approve of this monopoly being created by this initiated ballot measure? And then the second question would be the ballot measure itself. So if both of these questions hypothetically are approved, then the measure would pass. If only one question was approved, the measure would fail. So that's what this measure in November is trying to do. It's trying to create this new mechanism of direct democracy ballot measure process in Ohio. The other kind of interesting aspect to this one is if this monopoly measure is approved by voters in November, and if the marijuana measure is also approved by voters in November, the monopoly one would essentially negate the marijuana one. So some supporters of the marijuana legalization measure are saying that the legislature isn't actually worried about monopolies. They just wanted to get this onto the ballot so that it's another way they could potentially negate the marijuana measure if it's approved. So there's a lot going on in Ohio.
Does it negate it in its entirety or just negate the cultivation aspect of it?
No, negate it in its entirety, because the way the legislative referral is written, it would take effect, or I think it would take effect right away, whereas if the marijuana measure is approved, it would come into effect, I think, 30 days after it's passed. So because the legislative amendment goes into effect earlier, it would negate entirely the marijuana use measure.
Interesting. And then in Mississippi, we have a public education ballot initiative?
Yes, and this one's interesting. We're watching this one because this is the first time the legislature has ever referred a competing measure to the ballot. They've always had the power to do this, but they've never done it in the past. So what's going on is the legislature referred, it's called Alternative 42. The original initiative was Initiative 42. And voters have gotten upset because the language for these ballot measures, they're competing, but they're essentially appearing as one. And voters are concerned that the language is too confusing and that neither will be approved because this language is confusing and voters have never seen it before. So a lawsuit was brought against this by a local mother who said just that. She's worried that the measure won't be approved. Voters don't understand this new process. And the courts took it up, and it currently is with the state Supreme Court, and they are trying to decide how to reword this alternative ballot measure to make it less confusing.
So is it a bit unusual, I guess, that we have states that they're going to have ballot measures without any statewide elected officials, and at the same time they're unusual because we have competing measures that could cancel each other out in each state?
Right. And it's actually, we do often see ballot measures in states during odd years when there are no elected officials. That's not uncommon. But in Mississippi, like I said, it is uncommon that the legislature proposed this competing measure. So voters will essentially be asked to answer several questions. They will be asked if they are voting for either measure or neither measure. If they're voting for neither measure, then that's the end of that. If they're voting for either measure, then they will select which measure they approve, either Initiative 42 or Alternative 42.
And then in Washington State, there's a tax initiative that you're watching, correct?
Yes. Tim Eyman is kind of a prolific direct democracy activist in Washington State. He has been proposing measures to the ballot for years. And in 2010, he proposed Initiative 1053, which was approved by voters. He was essentially trying to make it so that any tax increases had to either be approved by voters at the ballot or had to be approved by at least 2/3 of the legislature. So like I said, that was approved in 2010 by the voters, but the courts ruled parts of it unconstitutional. So this current measure that he's approved, it has not made the ballot yet, but it still has the chance to. This current one is called 1366. And again, it was proposed by Tim Eyman. He's kind of trying to put the legislature between a rock and a hard place a little bit. The language of this measure is that if it's approved, the state sales tax would decrease from 6.5% to 5.5% beginning in April 2016. So if that happens, the state stands to lose something like $1 billion. They would lose quite a bit of money if that state sales tax decreases. However, the wording of the measure allows the legislature to refer a constitutional amendment to the ballot that would essentially reinstate the provisions of that 2010 ballot measure. So any future tax increases would have to be either approved by voters or approved by 2/3 of the legislature. So Tim Eyman kind of gave the legislature an out there. If they don't want to see the sales tax decrease, then they can refer this ballot measure to the ballot. So that will be interesting. Again, it's not certified yet, and it would have to pass for any of this to kind of get started. But it's definitely an interesting direct democracy move, if you will.
Now, Brittany, one last question. We're running out of time here. Do any of these initiatives require a particular vote, or it will just be a majority of the people that come out and vote in the fall?
I believe, let's see, the two Ohio ones are both constitutional amendments, as is, I believe, the Mississippi. I would need to double check. Some states do require constitutional amendments to be approved by a 60% majority or 2/3 or something like that. I would need to double check and see if those states are among those. In Washington, is just an initiative to the people, so that would just be a simple majority.
Gotcha. Well, while you're checking, I'm going to have my viewers check, because you're going to tell everybody right now how to find the great information you have on the Ballotpedia website, and they can check themselves.
Yes,
So,
yeah. If you go to ballotpedia.org, all of this information and then some is included on our pages. We have, across the top of the site, you can go to different areas of government. We have federal, state, local, ballot measures, Congress, school boards. Essentially every aspect of government you could ever be interested in is all on Ballotpedia.
in this case, we're going to state elections?
Yes. So if you are specifically interested in ballot measures, probably the easiest thing to do would be to go to 2015 ballot measures page. And that breaks down by state, by date, all the elections. From there, you can go to the individual state landing pages. So for example, if you were interested in those Ohio marijuana measures, you would go to Ohio 2015 ballot measures. And it would show the measures that are certified for the ballot. So it would show that monopoly measure that was referred by the legislature. The bottom half of the page will show the potential measures that still could make the ballot. So the marijuana legalization one would be there. And if you click on those, you can read all about the individual measures, and we have some historical stats on those pages as well.
Well, Brittany, as always, thank you for your time. And if things start heating up on one of these elections, come back to us so we can drill down and get in greater detail.
Okay, thanks.
Thank
Stephen.
you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.